Hello. Um, Today I want to take a little bit of time and talk about the idea of accelerated education, which is something that BitMaker Labs is kind of all about. I'm trying to learn how to program in 9 weeks, and before this, I have never written a line of code in my entire life. Obviously, this seems like a very difficult task, and some people might be saying, I say it's impossible. It's not. Yesterday, we actually had Scott Young come into the space. And for those who don't know, Scott Young decided to try and learn a computer science degree from MIT in 1 year as opposed to 4. He did it. And he used resources made available by MIT that are online to do so. And of course, some people are going to say he doesn't have the same exact knowledge that an MIT student would have. And the answer to that is yes, that is true. But he understands the concepts. He understands the broad picture of things, right? And that's kind of what knowledge seems to be all about, is understanding broad pictures. And that's kind of what this program at BitMaker is all about, right? Before this week, I never touched a database in my life. I had heard MySQL before, but I've never played with it. I don't understand it. Today, I have a pretty good understanding of how a database functions and how to make a database do what I want it to do and how to store the information I want it to store. And that's something that could take weeks in a traditional learning set. And if I sit down and I need to explain every single bit of a database, it's not going to happen. However, I understand the broad picture of it, right? Because I have been able to conceptualize it and visualize it and put it into a real world context. And this is something that kind of goes into studying techniques. Because some people do rote memorization, right? They sit down, they study, they do a problem over and over and over and over again until they finally can replicate it. The problem with rote memorization, though, is that you have a very inflexible amount of information. If you change the parameters of the problem, all of a sudden everything that you thought you know suddenly doesn't make sense because you don't understand the broader picture and the broader scope of the problem. And that's what visualization is kind of all about. Using hand gestures to kind of separate problems and understand where things go in the broader scope. Because you're more likely to remember what your hands were doing at that time than you would by looking at a diagram, right? So you go and you visualize, you make metaphors, you make analogies, you put something into a real world context, like this word sounds like X, or that image looks like this, and you make a story about that. So it doesn't necessarily matter if you remember a story or not, but you're remembering the link, and that's how the mind likes to store data. And this can be proven pretty easily by asking you if you remember your first kiss. In all likelihood, you probably do. And that's because there was a lot of information in the real world about that. There was emotions, there was a place, there was a smell, there was music. Unless you were drunk, maybe you don't remember. But that aside, you remember because the mind likes remembering vivid things, and it doesn't like remembering just basic information. So if you can understand concepts, you can understand the broader scope of something, in my opinion, that's far better than just being able to replicate a problem more than once. So even if you're not trying to learn programming in 9 weeks, you can still employ this methodology in your studying techniques, right? Because clearly there are people who seem to not do any work, but who still can test better than somebody who has spent hours and hours of their time trying to replicate a problem. And it's just is looking at that and understanding that it's not because they have a better work ethic than you. They don't. They're just studying smarter. So I guess I'm going to leave you with that information. Visualize, conceptualize, make analogies, and make knowledge into the real world, because that's how you remember things. I've been rambling for far too long, so I'm going to sign off. But if you want to follow me on Twitter, I am on Twitter, and I tweet interesting things all the time at Matt Wykaitis. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. All right, bye.